I, 32 male, and my wife, 30, had our wedding completely ruined by my parents because they prioritized my sister's birthday party over our big day. Now, they're demanding an invite to my son's baptism. But this time, I'm not letting it slide. I knew my parents had a habit of playing favorites, but I never thought they'd go this far. For as long as I can remember, my sister has been the golden child. She's the youngest, the most fragile, the one who needed the most attention. My parents always bent over backward to cater to her whims, while I was expected to be the independent one. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to work for it myself. So when I proposed to my wife, I had no illusions that my parents would be bending over backward for our wedding. But I still expected them to show up. Basic human decency, right? Apparently, I was wrong. It all started 6 months before the wedding. We set the date, booked the venue, and sent out invites. My parents got theirs early. My sister, who was 26 at the time, suddenly realized that our wedding was scheduled the same weekend as her birthday. Mind you, it wasn't even a milestone birthday, just her turning 27. She immediately started throwing a fit. But I always have my birthday party that weekend, she whined. I thought it was a joke at first. No one is that self-absorbed, right? But my mother actually turned to me and said, "Can't you reschedule? Your sister has had her birthday party on this weekend for years. It means a lot to her." I laughed, waiting for the punchline. It never came. "You can't be serious," I said. "Mom, it's my wedding. You had to save the date 6 months ago. But you know how much she looks forward to her parties," my father chimed in. "You could be a little more understanding." Understanding? Understanding would be her realizing that a wedding takes priority over a birthday party. Understanding would be my parents telling her to get over it, instead of expecting me to move my wedding for her. I refused, and that's when the manipulation started. First, my sister started crying to extended family, painting me as the selfish older brother who was trying to ruin her birthday. Then my parents started guilt-tripping me, calling every week to ask if I'd reconsider the date. When that didn't work, they started with ultimatums. "If you don't change the date," my mother said one night, "I don't know if we'll be able to come." My father added, "It would just be too hard for your sister to be alone on her birthday." I was stunned. Alone? My sister had an entire group of friends. Her boyfriend. She wasn't going to be alone. She just wasn't going to have us there, because we'd be in my wedding, the wedding I assumed my parents would attend. I refused to give in, and they made good on their threat. On my wedding day, my parents and sister were nowhere to be seen. They didn't show up. No call, no text, no apology, just silence. Later, I found out from relatives that they had, in fact, attended a party that weekend. My sister's birthday party. A huge event, catered, a live DJ, the works. They had spent thousands on it. Meanwhile, my wedding? There was an empty table where my parents should have been. That should have been the final nail in the coffin. But oh no, it gets worse. I didn't hear from them for weeks after the wedding. Not a single call. No congratulations. No sorry we couldn't make it. Just silence. At first, I was furious. Then I just felt hollow. Like I had finally gotten undeniable proof of what I had always suspected. My parents would always choose my sister over me. Every single time. My wife, bless her, was my rock. She told me, "You don't need them. We have each other, and we have people who actually love us." And she was right. Her family showed up in full force at the wedding. My friends were there, and we had an amazing time despite the betrayal. But then, months later, my mother finally called. Not to apologize, not to explain, but to talk about how hurt she was that I hadn't reached out to them since the wedding. Yes, you read that right. She was upset that I hadn't spoken to them. I let her talk for a few minutes, just out of sheer disbelief. She droned on about how they didn't mean to hurt me, how my sister needed them, and how families should always forgive each other. That's when I cut in. "So you finally called me, not to apologize, but to guilt-trip me for not talking to you?" I said, voice cold. There was a pause. "That's not fair," my mother huffed. "You know how your sister is." I laughed. "Yeah, I do. And I know how you are, too." She gasped like I had just slapped her. I didn't bother wasting more breath. I told her flat out that she and my father had made their choice when they ditched my wedding for a damn birthday party, and I wasn't going to just forgive and forget because it was convenient for them. Then I hung up. After that, I went low contact. If they wanted to act like I didn't exist, I could return the favor. And for a while, it worked. My life was peaceful. My wife and I focused on building our lives together, and eventually we got the best news. We were expecting our first child. I didn't tell my parents, not because I wanted to be petty, but because they weren't in my life anymore. But of course, they found out through extended family. And suddenly, I was their son again. They started calling, texting, leaving long voicemails about how they wanted to be involved and make things right. My mother even had the audacity to act like nothing had happened, gushing about how she couldn't wait to be a grandmother. I ignored them. Then my son was born, and that's when the real circus began. The moment my parents found out my son was born, the floodgates burst open. My mother left voicemails in tears, sobbing about how much she wanted to meet her precious grandson. My father sent long-winded texts about how important family is and how they didn't want past misunderstandings to keep us apart. And my sister? She had the audacity to message me like nothing had ever happened. "I can't wait to be the best aunt ever," she wrote, followed by an obnoxious string of heart emojis. I left them on read. But the real kicker? When they heard about the baptism, we planned a small, intimate ceremony. Just close friends and the family members who had actually been there for us. I didn't invite my parents or my sister. Why would I? They hadn't earned the right to be in my child's life. But of course they found out. And that's when the entitlement hit overdrive. The demands begin. First, my mother called, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "We heard about the baptism, sweetheart. We're so excited. What time should we be there?" I didn't even hesitate. "You're not invited." Silence. Then, in a tone like I'd just insulted her entire existence, "Excuse me?" I kept my voice calm. "You weren't at my wedding. You made it very clear where your priorities were. You don't get to pick and choose when you want to be my family." She let out a sharp breath like she'd just been slapped. Then came the guilt trip. "That was different. You know your sister. She needed us. We never meant to hurt you." I scoffed. "But you did hurt me, and you didn't care until you realized you were being cut out." Then came my father, trying to play the peacemaker. "Son, let's be reasonable. This is about the baby. Family is family, no matter what's happened before." I laughed. Funny how that logic only works when you want something. Cue more justifications, more excuses. They regretted missing the wedding. They wanted to make amends. They were just trying to move forward. But never, not once, did they actually say the words we were wrong. That was all I needed to hear. "I'm not stopping you from moving forward," I said. "I just won't be moving forward with you." Then I hung up. The meltdown. It did not take that well. The next day, I woke up to an explosion of messages from relatives. My parents were outraged that I had banned them from their own grandchild's baptism. They were telling everyone that I was being cruel, that I was punishing them over one small mistake. My sister, ever the drama queen, even went on Facebook, posting some vague nonsense about families should always forgive and people who hold grudges only hurt themselves. I still ignored them. But then they crossed a serious line. A week before the baptism, my parents showed up at my house unannounced. I was in the middle of feeding my son when the doorbell rang. My wife checked the camera and froze. "It's them." I sighed, set down the bottle, and went to the door. I barely got it open before my mother pushed past me into the house. "We need to talk." My father followed, arms crossed, looking like he was preparing for battle. My sister trailed behind, fake sniffling like she was about to burst into tears. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. "You need to leave." My mother whirled around, eyes wide. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "You won't even talk to us?" I folded my arms. "We talked when you decided my wedding wasn't important enough. We talked when you ignored me for months. Now, I'm done talking." My father stepped forward. "Son, think about what you're doing. We're your parents. We deserve to be part of our grandson's life." I raised an eyebrow. "You deserve it? Like I deserve to have my parents at my wedding?" That shut him up. But my sister, she lost it. She stormed toward me, jabbing a finger in my face. "You're so selfish. You've always been selfish. You just want to punish us because you didn't get your way." I laughed in disbelief. "I didn't get my way. You threw a tantrum over a birthday party and got exactly what you wanted." She turned bright red, but I wasn't done. "You guys made your choice. Now you get to live with it." I opened the door. "Get out." My mother gasped. "You're kicking us out?" "Yes." And if you ever show up here again, uninvited, I'll call the police for trespassing. That's when the crocodile tears started. My mother sobbed about how I was breaking up the family. My father mumbled something about me taking this too far, and my sister, of course, stomped her foot like a child. But I didn't care. I shut the door in their faces. The final blow. They'd try to come to the baptism, but I had already warned the church and the venue ahead of time. Security was posted, and my parents were turned away at the door. And just to make it even better, I had made sure to invite the same extended family they had complained to. So when my parents made a scene outside, sobbing about how they were forbidden from seeing their grandchild, everyone already knew the truth. They embarrassed themselves. Completely. And after that, the calls stopped. The messages stopped. My parents finally seemed to get the hint that they had burned this bridge to the ground. Final thoughts. I don't regret a thing. For the first time in my life, I set a boundary and stuck to it. They tried every manipulation tactic they had: guilt, anger, public humiliation, but none of it worked. Because at the end of the day, they weren't upset about missing out on family. They were upset that they had finally lost control over me. And now, my son will never have to grow up wondering if his grandparents actually care about him, or if he's just an afterthought compared to someone else. So yeah, if you ever deal with entitled, toxic family members, here's my advice. Set your boundaries and let them deal with the consequences. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button. Unlike my parents, I actually show up when I say I will.